Welcome to Happy Planet, where we meet entrepreneurs, investors, and thought leaders driving a modern, nature-forward economy. I am your host, Abigail Carroll, and I believe that sharing these ideas has the power to change how we all engage in the world. This week, I have the immense pleasure of sharing my conversation with Philipp Stratmann, CEO of Ocean Power Technologies. Followers of penny stocks may recognize the name. They are a listed company under the ticker OPTT. Mind you, we are not making stock recommendations here, but as I do follow penny stocks, I was excited to have the opportunity to speak with Philipp about their power generation technologies that support everything from fisheries management to offshore wind, as well as defense and surveillance. My conversation with Philipp sparked scenes from the hunt for Red October. Their tech enables some pretty exciting work, and their footprint is expanding globally. It's also based on renewables. But as Philipp says, it's renewable because that's the best solution, not because they want to be renewable for the sake of being renewable. Let's get to it. Welcome to the podcast, Philipp.
Hi, Abigail. Nice to see you again.
Well, it's a real treat to have you here today. And you are in the blue tech space. And what problem are you guys trying to solve?
Well, what we're trying to go after and solve is being able to collect ocean data in places where there is otherwise no easy way to collect data that we require to do most things out in the blue economy. Be that from providing security, be that from providing intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance data, collecting of environmental data that is required for offshore energy production, data that's required to keep parts of the ocean safe, and doing all of that with minimal people involvement and minimal carbon emissions. So it's that kind of being out there, permanent sentinels, resident data gathering, using autonomous technologies. That's really what we're going after, and we see that it's a massive enabler to a lot of other things that people are trying to achieve out in the blue economy.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the government, we've got academics, we've got the environmentalists, we've got the energy companies. It seems like you've got a massive swath of potential clients out there, but you have more of a sort of environmental approach to it because you're trying to reduce the carbon footprint of existing technologies.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other people in this space. I think what we're doing is we're utilizing renewable technologies to an extent to do this data gathering. We're not a renewable energy provider per se.
Yeah.
But what we have found and what we have learned is that using renewable energies enables longer term deployments and enables minimally invasive type of deployments, and it enables autonomy. And that is something that then becomes really attractive to kind of commercial customers and also to government customers, and that includes defense and security, because by using renewable energies, you cause less of a disturbance. You're harder to spot where you are. You can be out there for longer. You have no heat or thermal signatures as such. There's a whole range of ancillary benefits. And on the commercial side, using renewable technologies means we can be deployed in places where otherwise you wouldn't be able to deploy.
Yeah.
And again, it's minimally invasive. It lowers the cost because you reduce the number of people that are required to do the data gathering and intelligence gathering and analysis. And equally, it does save them some carbon emissions. So I think it is utilizing the underlying renewable energy technology that we deploy, but then using it to actually host payloads and sensors that our customers truly care about.
Yeah. You were talking there, and I went right to The Hunt for Red October. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I do remember.
We can't find his buoys anywhere. Beep beep. I said buoy. I gave away the punchline here. Tell me tell me about some of the products that you guys are creating and what those applications look like.
Yeah, we've got two main product lines that we utilize, and they're complementary to each other. One is our power buoys, and they use a combination of wave solar and small scale wind energy generation. And we capture that energy and then we store that inside battery banks that we have on our buoys, and then we fuel our payloads from that battery bank. So that gives us the ability to sort of trickle charge the batteries. You don't, if you're having a day of very low, if it's a gray day with no waves and there is no wind, it makes no difference to our customers because we continue being able to power the payloads based on the previously generated power that we've stored as energy in the batteries.
When you
So
say
that's the one
payloads, sorry,
payload. Yeah.
when you say payloads, can you define that for us?
Yeah, I mean, anything that anybody wants to measure or monitor. So that could be a surface camera, it could be a radar system, it could be, electronic detection systems on the surface. It could be underwater environmental sensors. It could be hydrophones to listen to, do mammal tracking, listen for whales that are migrating up and down the coast. It could be capturing a combination of those sensors and then having them run through onboard analytics and computing so that you can then make intelligent decisions on what you actually need to do as opposed to providing raw data feeds. So by payloads, we mean essentially anything you can attach to it. As long as it fits within the weight and power budget, we'll probably be able to integrate it.
Very cool. Okay, so you had one set of products and then I interrupted you for the definition.
Yeah, so that's on the buoy side. And on the other side, we have autonomous vehicles. They range in size between 8 and 22 feet. They're a mix between battery powered or at the larger size, gas or diesel powered. And we sort of refer to them as the pickup trucks of the USV world. They enable very shallow draft operations for longer periods of time. And again, they're really there to provide payloads, slightly different payloads than what you would have on the buoys, although there is an overlap. Again, you could use them for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You can have them going around with radar, cameras, other electronic signature sensors, or you can use them to do survey work. So you could use them to do seabed surveys. You can do that autonomously. You don't need a large support boat. You save carbon emissions, you save cost, you save time, you save people's efforts out in the ocean. Or you can start deploying more advanced sensors. You could deploy underwater robots. You could launch aerial drones to inspect or, whatever you need the aerial drones for to do their job. You could use it as a communications node. So if you have a whole range of other autonomous vehicles operating, you could use our vehicle to go out as a sort of transponder node that amplifies a communication signal as you're moving around a field where you're trying to do work. And then ultimately, it's those two products with their various payloads then coming together and operating jointly. We've put that under what we call MEROS, which is sort of, that kind of artificial intelligence capable data construct, where you could have permanent sentinels and resident data gathering through your buoys. And then in addition to that, you have data and intelligence you're gathering from your roaming autonomous systems. And then they collaborate and then you reinforce that intelligence that you have and you get a more granular data picture because you can combine those data sets and really enable customers to get a, 360 or a spherical view of what is going on in the maritime domain and the space where they're interested in.
A lot of the devices that I've seen in startup world right now are small objects. Yours are meant to be out there and withstand long periods of time and be in deep water, and they are industrial scale.
They're made to last. It stems from who a lot of the people are at OPT nowadays. Most of us, I think we're kind of over 20% veterans across the company. A lot of the ones that are veterans also spend time in the marine industry afterwards. Those that aren't veterans oftentimes come from either commercial fishing or oil and gas. So we sort of know what it's like to be out there, and we know what it's like to get your feet wet. So, making something look fancy and cool doesn't really help you when you're trying to withstand the ocean, because it's a pretty unforgiving
For
place to
sure,
operate
for
in.
sure.
So we've gone for it needs to work and it needs to solve our customer's problem, or at
Yeah.
least be part of the solution, as opposed to it needs to look cool in a way that you could post it on social media somewhere.
I think a
Personally,
lot of
I'm a little bit biased about the fact that I do think it's quite cool when you're having like a big buoy sitting there and a vehicle comes on and remotely attaches itself to then charge up and then go on its next job. A lot of the time we launch our vehicles from marinas and ports. We just
yeah.
need a boat ramp. You don't need any complex ports. I mean, as long as there's a boat ramp for the smaller vehicle, as long as there's the beach where you can carry the vehicle into the water, we'll go from there.
Yeah.
The buoys, there can be near coastal, although the buoys are definitely more deep water geared. Although that's a bit of a misnomer because the water doesn't need to be deep.
Mm.
We will happily operate in the Middle East where the water isn't that deep, but it is definitely offshore. So I think
Right.
we can do both. And I think oftentimes our vehicles are used for that near coastal or kind of type effort, but you can equally launch our vehicles,
Mm.
and some of our customers have done, from a boat. So you could be 100 nautical miles out, put the vehicle out there, and it starts operating. We're happy operating up to sea state 5 with our larger vehicles. So it can get pretty rough, and we still collect a lot of really high fidelity data.
We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. I'd like to thank Gulf of Maine Research Institute and Bold Ocean Ventures for their support of Happy Planet podcast. GMRI and Bold Ocean Ventures have partnered to create a mission-driven venture capital fund supporting the growth of innovative, sustainable, ocean-related businesses. Listeners may remember Patrick Breeding, who was on our show last year to talk about Marin Skincare and its clinically proven formula that uses glycoproteins from Maine lobsters to treat eczema and dry, damaged skin. This company has since become wildly successful with this lobster lotion, and Patrick is inviting listeners to a 20% discount on their products by using the coupon code HAPPYPLANET on their website, marinskincare.com. I use this product myself, and I highly recommend it. Welcome back to Happy Planet. Your buoys are renewable, but they're pulling from a lot of different power sources. I think you were originally just using wave power, and then you've added solar and wind. Can you tell me about that and how that's impacted the power of that buoy?
Yeah, I mean, OPT's original buoy design was definitely all wave. But that really limits you to where you can utilize this technology. And you need to have the right waves and you need to be in the right location, and it's kind of a bit exclusionary. It's also, if you're trying to grow a company, not the easiest way to do it, because now you're trying to find areas where you have a power generation source rather than trying to find the areas where customers have problems that you could solve by being there on autonomous basis. So what we did, we moved all the wave energy conversion inside of the buoy, so we have no external moving parts. By doing that, we freed up the entire real estate at the top of the system, which enabled us to put solar panels on it and enabled us to put small wind turbines on it. And when I say small wind turbines, I don't mean like small, like, kind of like megawatt type systems that are sitting off the coast somewhere. It's like the kind of things you would see on like a sailing boat. And what that has meant is we now have a much more diversified power generation portfolio. And we haven't gone for like making the most power because we're not grid connected. We're not selling electrons. What we try to do is find a way of combining wave, solar, wind, so that we have a solid generation profile in most parts of the world where there's water, where we can deploy and help solve customer problems. The other thing that it enabled us to do is we can now do things like essentially remove the internal wave power system. You can now put this into the Great Lakes if you needed to. You can start looking at areas where we've recently been expanding, like the Middle East. There isn't really a huge amount of wave energy once you get off the coast of, UAE or Kuwait or Iraq or some of those places. But there's lots of solar power there. So by doing that, we've opened up the the potential universe of where the same problem set exists. It just wasn't able to be solved using autonomous systems previously because they were over reliant on wave power. So
Yeah.
it's really helped us balance out that profile.
Yeah. And will you get enough if you just went to solar, for example, in some area because it was low wind and low wave? Would that be enough to satisfy the energy need for most of your clients?
For for a lot of the applications, it is
Yeah.
enough, and it depends on what you're trying to do, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think so even if you're having a bad day or two,
Yeah.
there's up to 150 kilowatt hours of storage on a buoy, and that gives you sufficient power to kind of or energy reserves to go through periods of poor weather.
Yeah.
Um, there aren't many days of like no sunshine in the Middle East,
So I
but
hear.
what we have found is balancing out those power generation sources just really helps in terms of overall availability and robustness.
Mhm.
And what we're excited about is that integration of then being able to use the USVs to kind of future state charge themselves up on the buoy, so you
Yeah.
really go into that full autonomy behavior out on the ocean.
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense. And you're not dragging fuel across the ocean. And I feel like this sort of multi-pronged approach to energy generation is something that we're seeing more on land, certainly at the power center level.
It becomes a case of all of the above. I mean, I
Yeah.
think one thing we decided, when the current management at OPT stepped in just over 3 years ago, is that what we were looking for is we tried to solve the problem the other way around. We looked at, okay, what is a problem that a large set of our likely customer base has? And then how do you get there? How do you provide them the power that they need there? And that has really helped us on the growth we've seen over the past 3 years. It's been stepping away from doing wave power for wave power's sake or clean tech for clean tech's sake. It has been like, okay, here's something we can actually do. And what that means is that step by step, we're seeing customers integrating the systems because they now know it works, they know it exists, and they know it helps solve a problem. And a lot of that has come from being very open and ambiguous about the fact that going, yeah, if that's the defense and security sector, then we work in the defense and security sector. We
Yeah.
think there is a real need out there to do monitoring and ocean protection and ocean
Yeah.
security, and that extends to prevention of illegal fisheries, that goes to safeguarding borders, that goes to looking at MPAs, and so on and so forth. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens out in the ocean that requires long-term monitoring,
Yeah.
and by combining various power sources, you're actually able to help solve the problem. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, why have a tanker that needs to go out, that you then need to go and offload some fuel, and then need to get some soldiers or mariners to kind of then refuel a system that's floating out there? By using renewable sources to solve the problem, you end up removing a whole bunch of failure points that
Yeah.
exist in that supply chain.
Yeah. And human capital that is expensive.
The buoy does not get seasick.
Right. Something I know about. How did you get into this? I love that you've got all these vets there.
Yeah, I'm a naval architect by background. Spent some time in the military myself, and then also worked in offshore oil and gas for a long period of time. And then joined OPT. I thought the technology was really promising, and then over the past few years, retooled management in the company, and we've really gone after going, hey, that's great, but in order for this to become accepted and this kind of entire industry to start growing, we need to go and actually help customers solve problems. You can't be dependent on grant funding or
Yeah.
working with academia constantly and trying to tweak a system over and over again. At some point, you have to go, here's something here, and it needs to work and it needs to be robust. But yeah, I grew up doing stuff on the ocean, in the ocean. So I've just think, with where we're at and with my background and the background of the people that we have here, we felt that it's a really exciting time to work in this part of the industry. There is a real need, and when it comes to ocean tech,
Mm.
Ocean tech is at least, I would say, probably a decade, if not further, behind what happens in the air and what happens on land.
Yeah.
And that's mainly due to the fact that it's a pretty unforgiving environment. There's also not that many people that work in it. I mean, whilst 70% of the planet is water, that doesn't necessarily mean that lots of people work in or around the ocean. And I
Yeah.
think there is a need to drive that part of the blue economy forward. We're grateful for the fact that blue economy is actually a term nowadays, and
Yeah.
the fact that there is much more acceptance for what's dual use technologies that can be used in defense and security, but also on the commercial side.
Yeah.
And by having the backgrounds that we've got at OPT, we understand how things get used out there, and we understand how abusive the ocean environment can be. And I think that's also helped us get to where we're at now.
Because it's not a new company. Can you explain a little bit about, the company was founded?
I've been CEO for just over 3 years,
Okay.
and I've been with OPT in total for 4.5 years. So I think OPT was founded originally around technology related to power generation.
Yeah.
That was then it went after kind of grid scale wave power systems.
Yeah.
Then it moved over to doing non-grid scale wave power systems, which is where the original wave power system came from that we had until very recently, the PB3. And then in the 3+ years that I've been CEO, we integrated autonomous vehicles. We moved into the next generation buoy, which is the one I explained, that where everything is on the inside, there's no externally moving parts. We de-emphasized tweaking the very last percentage point out of the power generation, but instead we focused on making sure that the systems are robust, easy to install, easy to maintain, easy to deploy, and easy to integrate. And that's really been the focus that the current management team has had.
Yeah.
I think the company is public because it's been public for a long period of time. And obviously, we're a bit of an outlier, because I would say I think 80-90% of our competitors are all privately held, venture capital backed. But that is the structure that the company was in when we all came in, and we've been executing the growth in that environment.
Yeah. So what is that like? Because so many of 99.9% of the people who have businesses coming on the podcast have been sort of early stage venture. In some ways, I feel like you're still a startup because you've got this new momentum around these new products and you're a micro cap stock. I'm just curious as to how being a public company shapes things like fundraising or innovation or getting contracts. I think there's probably some pluses and some negatives.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on the plus side, I mean, there aren't really any secrets.
Yeah.
Anybody can go on the SEC website or on our investor relations website and download our quarterly reports and our annual reports. Where we stand financially, how we're doing, the size of our pipeline, and so on and so forth. That helps. That means we have audited reports.
Yeah.
And certainly when we've been expanding overseas, that is a big bonus. Obviously, with that comes governance structures that we have, and I think they also help. Whilst they, I think for people that strictly have only ever worked in the private world, that obviously does mean that we have slightly more of an overhead than maybe a private entity might have. But at the same time, because we're public, we have the ability to tap into the capital markets
Yeah.
more on an ongoing basis if there's a
Yeah.
need, as opposed to it being really structured around venture capital raises, where it's okay, I'm coming up to the end of my runway and now I need to raise my Series A or my Series B or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So
Right.
I think that's a big difference. So yeah, it's got pros and cons. I would say the big pro is the fact that it makes it easier for us to do things like government contracting. It makes it easier for us
Yeah.
to expand because there's just more well, there's more auditable materials out there
Yeah.
on us.
What comes next? We are in an increasingly complicated world, between climate change and multipolar politics. Maybe in the shadow or in the light of this recent election, do you see that there's going to be more need for more governments are going to be looking for your type of product? Are we going to become more leery of each other, or how does this have an impact?
We're pretty excited about what the future holds, to be perfectly honest. We're dual use technology. We play equally well in defense and security as we play in offshore energy, which includes oil and gas, it includes offshore wind. And I just come back from a week in the UAE. I was out at ADIPEC in Abu Dhabi, which I think is the world's largest energy get together. And the appetite for our technologies is vast. And it isn't driven by one specific industry. I think the one thing we've been very clear about, and one thing we're pretty proud about, is that we've built a company that makes or provides solutions to our customers that are not dependent on government credits. We do not need regulatory credit support. Our systems stand and compete on their own mooring legs, so to put it that way. And same for the vehicles. Oil and gas companies, we live in a world where we can't live without oil and gas because we need to keep the lights on. They have as much of a desire and appetite for our systems as do offshore wind farm developers. And they have as much of a desire for our systems as does our Navy and allied navies. But equally, in a world where there's, hostile actions everywhere, the more you know what is happening at your water border, the better you can be prepared to make sure it doesn't impact your civilian population. So working with people like Homeland Security, for example, and looking at what's crossing our water borders, be that working with commercial entities that also have security interests that are looking at deploying our systems for asset security because they want to know whether anything is coming in underwater, on the water, or in the air that could threaten an oil rig, or that could threaten a tanker, or that could threaten an offshore wind farm. We see OPT as being really well positioned as an apolitical play.
Of course.
That keeps on growing no matter what. We play well in the sandbox with lots of different people.
And that'll be good for your stock.
I'd like to think so.
Do you have any advice for other blue tech entrepreneurs?
I think there's a couple of things. One is don't underestimate what the ocean is. Don't try and think that you can easily take what works on land or in the air and take that out on the ocean. It is an exceptionally harsh environment. And then also, the second bit, which I think is probably even more important, is try and solve an actual problem. I've got friends of mine who work on the software side. I think they always refer to product market fit. Make sure you actually come up with a product that has a market, because you are solving an actual problem instead of, hey, I've got this great technology, now you should have it because it's a great technology. I think that is a huge mistake lots of people make that come at this from, the pure engineering or science angle. You need to understand the market that you're dealing with. And, as I mentioned earlier, and it's one of the reasons why there's lots of us that are veterans. There's lots of us that have worked offshore in various forms and guises. And it's important because we're not surprised when we talk to our customers as going, well, this is how I'm going to use it. It makes sense because, I've seen that before in the Gulf of Mexico, or I've seen it in Nigeria, or I've got colleagues of mine who turn around and going, yeah, I've seen it being used off, Taiwan or in the Philippines this way, or this is how we used it in the Pacific. It's really important to solve a problem because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of time coming up with something that you think is really cool and you hold very close to your heart, but the entire world just looks at it going, that's nice, but it doesn't actually help advance. So, and I think with that comes kind of a third bit is also it's understand where you sit in that supply chain. Know your place is the wrong expression, but it's kind of understand who you need to work with. If are you really going to sell immediately to like the world's largest oil and gas or energy producers? Or are you better off talking to the third tier supplier to them that supplies somebody else who may or may not have a direct contact with the large companies? And that's still a massive market when you're growing something rapidly. So it's really know who you're working with and how you need to work on that industry, because you're not going to turn on its head centuries of marine and maritime knowledge and supply chains just because your widget is slightly cooler than somebody else's widget.
But I love that, start with the problem. Because there is this temptation in tech, because a lot of things come out of universities and these brilliant minds, but there's this major disconnect between this brilliant research, which may or may not have applications, and the real world problems that need to be solved. And sometimes it feels like they're just like a splinter away, but changing that requires just a complete rethink sometimes of the whole thing. So you're really looking at just a lot of wasted time and energy and money.
You can't wish a huge market to exist just because you dream it.
So speaking of dreaming, where do you want to take this? What's your vision?
I think we're excited to continue that growth that we have right now. And I think what we're really excited about building is that ongoing development of fully autonomous ocean intelligence. Being able to have forward deployed resident sentinels that when they see something that needs to be looked at further or that needs to be acted upon, they then automatically dispatch a USV. That USV goes to where, the sentinels told it there's something of interest, and then fixes the problem. If you look, that building that forward deployed ocean technology, ocean intelligence, inspection, repair, maintenance, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance type system. We think that is a huge market, and it's real. And I think that would be pretty exciting. I look forward to being able to go somewhere and you can start going, oh yeah, no, there's 5 buoys off, that island chain, and they're monitoring, the following wind farm, and they're also keeping the local fishing fleet safe, and it's all done with no emissions. And it's all done with no human involvement out in the ocean, so it keeps people safer, and they can concentrate and focus on the economic growth that comes from, whatever aspect of the blue economy they're involved in. Doing that will make us all a lot safer than we are dealing, with some of the adversaries that are out there that have, not so well-meaning intentions.
Yeah. Wow, it sounds like a blockbuster movie.
I think a lot of people think this is sci-fi. It's science. I don't think it's fiction. And I think we're at that cusp where these things are happening. We've got dozens of our vehicles operating around the globe. We've got buoys moving around. So all the building blocks are there. We've demonstrated the ability to charge. I think we're at the cusp of really making this become a reality. And I think what is exciting about that is the fact that will then invite others into the ecosystem, because that opens up the ecosystem for others to going, hey, I've got a great idea about software, or hey, I'd love all this data to feed an ocean-specific large language model in AI. And I think all of that is going to be enabled by what is sort of here as building blocks, but just needs to be deployed at a slightly larger scale than it is right now.
Right. You're dealing with a lot of environmental people. Are you optimistic about our race against climate change? How is your perspective on this problem?
I spent most of my time concentrating on growing OPT and playing in the blue economy. I think I am encouraged by the number of companies and people that work in the blue economy space. That's the one I can speak for the most.
Yeah.
And I am encouraged by the fact that there's an increasing number of people and a cohort of companies that is solving actual problems using these underlying technologies.
Yeah.
And I think being able to grow companies like OPT and others in our space is automatically going to lead to more renewable energy generation out in the ocean, supporting the blue economy. And I think by the fact that it is renewable, but just like, hey, this solves your problem, you're going to get much further than trying to lecture people about the fact that, well, you should use this because it is renewable. It's like, no, you should use this because it solves your problem. It's cheaper than the alternative. It's safer than the alternative because you're removing humans out of the loop, and it enables you to do what you need to do. So I think that to me is how you're going to solve the problem. The problem gets solved by the deflationary aspects of technology advancements. I think over reliance on regulatory credits doesn't help anybody.
What I almost said earlier in the podcast was one of the things I think is so inspirational about your product is that it's renewable because that's what works best.
Isn't just about how much does it cost you to generate the electricity. In our case, it's, well, how much does it cost you to generate the electricity and get it to where you need it to be? Yeah. And I think this is where, like, hey, you can spend a couple of $1,000s a day on some USVs that are electrically powered, or you can go the traditional route and spend $50,000 plus per day on a bunker fuel burning boat with 10 people on it. Well, right. It becomes really easy to talk to customers when you frame it that way. Yeah. Same as with the buoys. You know what? You can get satellite data 2-3 times a day of this patch in the ocean, or you could have a boat out there. Again, that's going to cost you $50,000 a day, or you can put a buoy there. Put it there. And guess what? It will be there for 3 years before you have any maintenance. It's not going to complain. It's not going to whinge. It's going to give you 24/7 access to much higher granular data. And it's going to cost you a fraction of what you would have paid for the traditional technologies. And it just so happens to use renewable power to do what it needs to do. And I think that is what's really going to drive up that is driving up the demand. That's going to then help further drive down the costs, because that's where the incremental improvements start kicking in. And I think that is how you build a huge deployed base that then starts changing the conversation that we're having out in the ocean.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today, Philip. I really appreciate it. And I expect your company is going to continue to prosper.
Thanks, Abigail.
Thank you once again for listening. Please follow Happy Planet wherever you tune in and leave us a rating and review. Happy Planet was reported and hosted by me, Abigail Carroll. I am also the executive producer. Composer George Brandel Egloff created our theme music. Learn more about my work and get in touch by visiting happyplanetpodcast.com.